let's kick things off in a way that, I don't know, it's so hard to talk about this game because as we were going through what do we want to talk about, the list just kept going and going and going. This is one of the most dense, complex, busy, just insanely detailed and enormous games that Nintendo has ever made. I would say it is probably the most ambitious, biggest, and impressive game Nintendo has ever made. And when you look at the gap between Skyward Sword and this, as we were discussing before, it seems like there should have been a game in between. And maybe that game is Link Between Worlds to some extent when you're thinking about like the non-linearity stuff. But it's kind of staggering that you go from the limited Skyward Sword, which I personally love and I think is a great game, to the endless possibilities of Breath of the Wild. It's astonishing.
Yeah, it's like most companies, there could have been about 5-6 games between Skyward Sword and this game before they get to something like this. I don't understand how they managed to do it, to be honest. Like how they managed to get something that's so detailed and vast and looks gorgeous, and we can just go on. It's just about the positives, but I don't understand how. Well, obviously this game was delayed considerably, and totally. I'm now very, very happy that happened. But
the thing is, Zelda games always get delayed, Bally. Like Twilight Princess was delayed infamously, and that was the same situation as we have here.
Sword was delayed so much that everyone was very confused when it finally came out because.
Remember that E3 where they were like, "Oh yeah, everything's done except the graphics," and we were like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like. What does that even mean? Oh dear. The Zelda team have had some weird times, but. Okay, let's start with first impressions. How did you feel when you started off the game, getting used to the controls, going around the Great Plateau? For me personally, I had seen a lot of the Great Plateau. Over E3, I was watching every single video. I'd seen the shrines. I'd seen every single area. I knew about the things like getting the thing at the top of the mountain, which is the clothes that keeps you warm. I knew about like eating particular foods. How much of that had you absorbed, Bally, and how much of the Great Plateau was kind of a surprise to you?
Not much of the Great Plateau was a surprise. I'd seen the same videos as you, maybe not as many as in-depth as you had, but I had certainly seen all 4 of the shrines on the Great Plateau, and I'd seen what you do in those shrines, and I think that, yes, not much of that was a surprise, but it was just the joy of just playing it and getting used to those controls. And like, on controls, I think it's a very, very complex control system. I want to say it's
absolutely,
there's so much going on. You've got your bow and arrow, you've got your throwing items, you've got your shield, you've got all your all the things that your tablet. What's it called? The tablet.
The runes.
The runes, exactly. And then on top of that, you now have a jump for the first time in Zelda ever. You've got it's just so much going on, and then it almost feels like Zelda combined with Metroid in some ways, the way that you swap between items on the so-called D-pad and things like that. It's very complicated.
Kind of Metroid Prime-esque, right, with the beam switching.
Exactly. It's like swapping the types of weapons you have constantly. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, but it's like every single action that you need to take seems to have a lot of steps to it and a lot of buttons assigned. Like, taking out a bomb, what do you have to do first? Okay, you have to hit up on the D-pad to see which rune you activate. Then you use the right analog stick to move across to it. Then you hit the L button to open the rune. Then do you want to put it down or you want to throw it? So that's either A or R. Then you have to detonate it, which is L. Like, this simple action in a Zelda game, which would usually just be take out a bomb and throw it, is basically extrapolated into so many different actions.
And the number of times I've blown myself up because it's just like, whoops.
Yeah, which button did I press?
Exactly. It's just like, right, my bomb was out. I pressed L1 by accident. That's me dead. Great.
I've seen some people on Twitter saying they had like some really good weapons that they accidentally fucking threw off a cliff. Because there's a button where you can throw your sword at an enemy, which is really cool when you want to kill them if it's almost broken. But yeah, stuff like that happens all the time in the opening hours. I think the Great Plateau is a great place because it is a small enough area to where you don't have that many like crazy things that you're getting that you're going to use for the rest of the game. It's very early, so if you make the mistakes, it doesn't really matter that much. And ultimately, the save system is built so that you can go back and reload stuff if you feel like you fucked up and not be too far back. So I think overall that works to its advantage. But yeah, generally, I think how I felt after going through the Great Plateau was it was a little bit going through the motions for me, because there wasn't really any surprises or any joy of like finding something new that I hadn't seen. Like, I knew what all the weapons were going to be. I knew that there was a fire rod in this place, and that if I climbed the Temple of Time I could find a bow, and if I went to the top I could get a Korok, because there are millions of fucking Koroks hidden around this game with their seeds. And so I was kind of just ticking off the boxes in a way while I was getting used to the controls. So I really wasn't, super deep into the game, like loving it at that point. Did you kind of turn after you got off the plateau, or were you like starting to think this is great from the beginning?
I mean, I thought it was great from the beginning, but it got greater for sure.
Yeah.
Like when you're on the plateau, it feels great, it looks great. I love that you can just sort of look off the plateau and you can't really see the ridge so clearly. Obviously, there is a ridge, but it's a neat way of hiding it, where you're in this sort of beginner's area, but you're actually still in the whole world, and it like looks out. It looks great. I was sold far more on stuff outside the plateau, but I was already hooked from the plateau.
Yeah, there's some really cool things I pulled off while I was on the plateau, like. So I was getting used to using the bow and arrows and the fact they have an arc to them. And I find this creature, I think it might have been a fox, and I shoot the fox and it doesn't kill it, so it starts running away. And as it's running away, I arc my bow up to like a specific height, let go, and as the fox is running, the arrow arcs down and nails it. And I fucking do this amazing, like, fucking Ramsay Bolton-esque, arrow through the air to come down and murder my target. And I was so satisfied with that. I'm like, okay, you can do some cool fucking shit in this game. And that was just the beginning,
And it's really cool that you can already experience like a snowy mountain with the heat stuff going on, and all this snowboarding, all these things. And that's really early on. It's really a good thing for the game to train you on initially.
They teach you about how to use all the systems, right? Like, you learn that, you can use the runes in certain environments, and you get the temperature stuff figured out, and there's some stuff you can do with stealth that makes it easier for you if you're taking on certain enemies. Generally, that stuff is super well done, but I think it was once I jumped off with the glider that I started to feel better about the game, because I think I felt I was held back in the original kind of starting area, because you have to climb everywhere and walk everywhere, and getting to places is fine, but when you know the area, it's not as fun as when you're exploring out in the open space. And so as soon as I got the glider, I was like, oh yes, now I can just jump off places, not have to worry, and just find areas by doing that. So that was a big thing. But if we're talking about kind of first impressions, I think it's probably important to talk about the look of this game, how it runs, the music, all these kind of aesthetical elements that we kind of get out of the way early. Yeah. I think the game looks fantastic and has a brilliant art style which really captures that essence of Wind Waker, but also, a more cartoonish kind of anime aesthetic that... Yeah. It feels like you have this evolution. If we're leaving out Twilight Princess, you feel like there's this evolution from Wind Waker to Skyward Sword and to this game. And I think that this is kind of the perfect distillation of all those art styles into one.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's got those aspects of the HD remake of Wind Waker when you're talking about the redesigned skies, and like the colors pop a lot more. And you've got the bloom effect that's just used everywhere in this game, on all the shading and things like that. You're right, it almost looks like that combined with a lot of stuff that was in Skyward Sword. We talk a lot about water effects, throughout our history of gaming, MBZ, and like the water in this game is top notch. I can't believe how good like the world around you looks, because they've gone for like a degree of photorealism, but it's got a massive great dose of its own art style wrapped on top of it. It's not one or the other. It's like a really good blend, I feel.
Yeah, like, you look at the grass, and that is just the most luscious, beautiful, waving thing I've ever seen. Like, it's hard to compare it to, other games because they go for different things. Like, I was talking, I don't know how many episodes it was that I played the expansion for Witcher 3, but Blood and Wine has what I think is the best looking grass ever in a game. And I think that's very much from a technical perspective, right? I look at that game and I think it's a technical masterpiece. But I think the grass in Zelda looks just as good. It's not from a technical aspect. It's from a much more artistic point of view. And that's what Nintendo does, is they come from these different angles at it to make it shine in a way that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And I think, that's generally all over this game. There are a lot of textures which seem a little rough, especially when you're climbing mountainsides and stuff. It's very obvious that there's very low resolution textures going on here, but ultimately that doesn't really matter to me, and I don't think it should matter to people, because it gets across what you want to get across, and it looks perfectly fine, in my opinion. And that's what I want to see. So that aside, we got to talk about the frame rate, because that's a big sticking point, and I think a lot of people have brought up the point. I did not expect this game to be this chunky in certain areas. It is actually kind of astonishing that it runs that poorly in certain places, but also sometimes it doesn't happen at all, and it's really weird. There's been comparisons. Digital Foundry put up a video comparing the Wii U and the Switch version, and there are different areas in the plateau. Some areas where the Wii U version runs perfectly fine at 30 and the Switch one dips down, and some areas where the Switch is fine and the Wii U one dips down. And they've talked about it might be a memory issue to do with RAM and stuff, which I have no idea how the fuck any of that works, and you even less so, Bally. But there's definitely problems with both versions of this game, essentially. Like, we're not getting this perfect, smooth frame rate, which to me hurts me deeply inside, because I think Nintendo care about frame rate more than any other first party. Like, they really put in a good effort to make sure all their games run smoothly and completely. And it's kind of un-Nintendo to put out a product that actually has this many drops in it. It's kind of astonishing, but it's also understandable from the perspective that you look at this world and the enormity and the scope of it, and you're like, okay, I'll give you a break, because it's kind of on a device that is this thin and small and tablet sized, that they even managed to fit this world in here is kind of astonishing.
I found, I don't know if you're the same, MBZ, I found it ran smoother when it was just the Switch in my hands. Like,
yes.
Off out of the dock. Then it was when I was on the dock in certain, I don't know, perhaps grassy areas, I might want to say, grassy, rainy areas. But yeah, I think I've not had a single hitch when it's been off the dock, actually.
No, it doesn't hitch at all when it's off the dock, and that is generally to do with the fact that on the dock, in portable mode, it is running at 720p. So the resolution being bumped down, running at 30 FPS, it runs completely smoothly. When you put it in the dock, it gets upgraded to 900p, which is then upscaled to 1080p through your TV or monitor. And it looks better, of course, but it will run worse because the resolution is higher. Right. So trying to keep a consistent frame rate with a higher resolution is where it's having trouble. So that is a thing that most people have reported. I found the exact same thing. But even like looking at Zelda on the portable screen is a masterful thing. It is absolutely jaw-dropping. Like, it's such a colorful game, and there are certain TVs and monitors that don't bring it out as much. And as soon as you switch to that handheld, it just becomes a glorious, glorious thing. It's just dripping and popping. It's so vibrant, it's not necessarily that it's oversaturated, but those colors feel like they're living in a way that they don't on a normal screen. And it's made me want to play in that mode a lot, but also you're kind of sacrificing the bigger kind of world around you that you're maybe not getting as much of.
And I think there's always a situation where you just would rather play a bit on the handheld. Like before, when you wake up in the morning and just before bed at night, perhaps, it's nice just to lie down in bed, get a bit of the Switch out and play a bit. And it's just such a great system for that, isn't it? It's just
totally. So I think like when we're talking about all these things, like the kind of soundtrack, the music is something that's probably important to bring up. So far, I found it kind of up and down. I like where it's very subtle, it's very subdued, and they weave in these very kind of light piano bits and pieces here, these kind of distant melodies, and then you hear kind of the familiar tunes overlaying over the top, and it makes sense that they would do that because you're spending a really long time in this world. So if they just had a loop that was the same song again and again, Xenoblade Chronicles X, you might, go crazy. And I appreciated that they made it subtle, because sometimes the music just drops out and you hear the environmental sounds and the things around you. I know you're someone who is a big fan of soundtracks generally, and you go out of your way to listen to them. I don't know if this soundtrack translates well to going on YouTube and going through a playlist. I'm not sure it really fits that.
I don't think it does either. I think you're right. I think it's more something, if you were reading a book while listening to some music, it might be a good soundtrack to listen to or something. It's very, very subtle. And like, if you play an Ocarina of Time or something, you go onto Hyrule Field and you get the big thumping tune. It's not that in the slightest. Like, it's much, obviously, Hyrule Field, whatever you want to call that in this game, is like the world is just so much bigger, that everything is slowed down so much more, that there's so much space, and that there is such an emphasis, as we'll get onto, on the wilderness and like picking berries, shooting animals, eating things, creating fires, doing all these things, that it's almost like they wanted it to be far more silent on purpose, so that they could really emphasize the sound design that they've absolutely nailed on something like the bird noises and the environmental noise, like the waterfalls and things like that. Like, there's just such great sound design emphasized by the lack of music throughout this game.
Yeah, I think that's something that, comparative to, and I haven't played the game yet, but comparative to Horizon, which everyone is comparing this game to, because hey, they're both.
Which one's better, MBZ?
Oh no, they're both. Everyone has said Horizon's amazing. I would like to play it later this year. But watching the Giant Bomb quick look, something I noticed about it is her pulling back on the arrow and releasing, from her bow sounded really bad. Like, it was something that just annoyed me on a personal level, as someone who appreciates good sound design. Really fucking pissed me off. I'm like, I'm gonna have to do a lot of bow shooting in this game, and if it sounds like this all the time, it's gonna be like a bit of a pain. But I think that is something that Zelda nails. It actually gets that sound perfect, and it really works. And just wandering around and hearing all these different various things is a joy. If you enjoyed this discussion and would like to hear more, consider subscribing to us on YouTube and following the podcast playlist. You can also find us on iTunes and various other places. Follow us on Twitter at TNL Podcast, and email us thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.